Morning. Please join me in prayer. God, thank you for your presence every day in front of us, leading us, and for your assurance that you will never leave us. Let my words today reflect your thoughts and your words, God. Let me effectively speak what you want us to hear. In Jesus' name, amen. It is difficult to prepare for a sermon, especially when you have a group of scholars like we do on Wednesday nights, because you get so many notes, so much input, then you want to cover it all, but you know you can't unless everybody here is willing to stay until 3 p.m. or something like that. So I'm going to try and do justice to everything that our scholars have put together, to everything that they noticed, to all their insights. But let's review a little bit about last week. Last week we talked about pillars of cloud and pillars of fire, a pillar of cloud and fire. The Israelites were going into the wilderness for the first time. They didn't know what it was going to be like. They had no clue what to do, what to expect, and really no way to turn back either. It was a terrifying situation for them to be in, but they learned right away that when they looked towards the pillar of cloud and fire to their leaders, they found the resources that they needed to fuel their revival and to learn how to thrive in a new environment. We learned a little bit about that environment that they were going to live and thrive in, the climate of it, and the climate of where I was raised. And I shared with you how I learned from these pillars and how I personally looked for those pillars of cloud and fire when I went into new situations, into new terrifying times and new anything. During these times of transition, of revival, because the very concept of revival is about transition, we need that hope. We need that glimpse that a future, any future, is actually possible. But what happens on day 2? What about day 3? Day 4? Day 400? Do things always stay the same? When does it end? When does the revival done? When do we reach our goals? How do we get there? What if we don't? In our Wednesday night Applying the Sermon to Life class, many of our scholars were intrigued by these concepts of transformation and revival in Isaiah, especially in Isaiah 35. Specifically, they had some questions about the crocus that Isaiah mentions. What is the crocus? Why does he mention a crocus? What's the purpose? What does it do? Because when you start to think about a desert, a high desert, what's the color, the first color that comes into your mind? It's brown. Much like this desert here, it's a brown. You don't think about color in a desert. A desert, normally you picture brown, beige, sand. It appears to be like that, brown, dusty, dead, lifeless. But that doesn't necessarily mean that there's no life there. The life is there, and it's just waiting for the right time to fully show up and to fully transform. Think about some of these past Nebraska winters that we've had. They act in the same way. In the middle of December, whether or not there's snow, you don't see much color. It's either white, or it's yellow, or it's brown, or it's black from the exhaust of everybody's cars. There's not much good color in the middle of winter. And for somebody who shows up for the very first time in the middle of winter, and they've heard stories about Nebraska, they wonder, where's all the green? What is this Nebraska thing that everybody's been talking about? It can seem like a failed promise, a promised land that doesn't live up to the hype. But it doesn't mean that the green isn't here. As Nebraskans, we know that this so-called barren landscape in winter will change. We know that given enough time, the air is going to warm up, the snow will melt, and the grass will start to turn green again. Flowers will start to bloom, weeds will start to grow. The high desert is the same way. Although these deserts are stuck in rain shadows from both sides, they can still experience a little bit of rain from time to time. But when this rain occurs, it often occurs in massive, very short-term just bursts of rain. It's just sunny. 2 minutes later, it's just a complete downpour. 10 minutes later, it's sunny again. And that might be all the rain you get for a couple of weeks. I remember one of these storms. This probably would have been around 2002, I think. I was in the house and it just suddenly started pouring rain. You could hear it. It sounded like thunder just from the sound of the rain on the roof. You walk outside, you walk to the sidewalk and back to the house, and you're completely drenched. But we were on this hill, and the street next to us just had this massive river just flooding down it. And it may not have been the smartest idea, but I took off my shoes and socks and walked into the street with this mass of water flowing down it, just to feel the water rushing around my calves, because it was up over top of the sidewalks. It was just fascinating to me to see all this water. Seeing all that water all at the same time was very bizarre, but it was only the start of what happened with the bizarre in the desert, because over the next few weeks, this brown, dead desert that I lived in turned completely green. There were plants there. They were waiting for this water to show up. And when it did, they opened up their leaves, they opened up their flowers, they opened up everything and absorbed as much light, energy, and water as they possibly could to store it up for the dry spell that they knew was coming. Brown, but not dead. The life is there. It just is simply different because it has learned how to thrive in a different environment. The plants, the wildlife, even the people who live there have all adapted to this different environment. They've adapted their routines and their behaviors in order to live within the environment that they have. In Chihuahua, the rain doesn't come all that often. And there are over 1 million people living in that city. It's a massive city, twice the size of Omaha. So where does everyone get the water they need? There isn't nearly enough water there to allow for everyone to use water like we do here in Nebraska. Here, we can turn on a faucet or the shower anytime we want and have full city water pressure, anytime. Turn it on, boom, water, fresh water right there for you. It doesn't happen like this in the high desert. In Chihuahua, if you stand on a hill and look across any of the neighborhoods, you'll see all the houses scattered all over the place. And every single house will be the same in one regard. On every single roof, there is a black 200-gallon tank. At night, this tank has a float on the inside, much like a toilet tank, and it fills up with water to a specific level where the float cuts off the water supply. Because during the day, there is no city water pressure. The city completely turns off all the water to the city during the day when the sun is out, so that people don't use it and the water doesn't evaporate and get lost. At night, these tanks fill up with their 200 gallons of water, and that is the household's allocation of water for the day. If you don't have that tank, you don't have water. These tanks, they're called tinacos. It's a word that everybody has learned. I don't even know what it means. I just know that that's the word. It's the tinaco, it's the tank on the roof. See, in order to conserve this water, they have to store it in particular ways in order to make sure that the people have the water they need in order to survive and to thrive. You learn how to adjust your habits to account for the amount of water that you have and the amount of water pressure that you have, which is next to nothing because it's all gravity fed. Without this rationing, the city would quickly run out of water, leaving countless people to die of dehydration. The city has to pace itself on its resource usage. And in our passage in Isaiah, we can see that these plants that are thriving in the desert know how to do this. They wouldn't be thriving unless they knew how to pace themselves and use the resources they had to thrive when they needed to, and when they had the resources to do so. And the crocus that he mentions, it's the spearhead of this transformation. It's the banner bearer of newness. It's the first flower to sprout. It's the first flower to open up. It is the first splash of color in the desert. It's the first hint that something's happening. You have a brown desert, suddenly you start having purple flowers popping up all over the place. Over there in the high desert, there are hundreds of different types of crocuses out there, all of which thrive in different kinds of environments. Over there, they have like a saffron crocus, which was very common there, which is where you get saffron from. But they sprout with these vibrant purple flowers. So in the middle of something like this, you have one purple flower that pops up, you're going to notice it. Your eye will be immediately drawn to it, and you will know, look, something's coming. Life is coming, transformation is coming. We have something to look for. But you can't just make that crocus appear whenever you want it to. Sometimes you have to wait for it. So you can look forward to it. You can hope for it. You can know that at some point it will come. But until it does, you have to keep doing what you're currently doing, using your resources wisely, effectively, persisting, living in what is now, not what will be. We all want things to change, and we want them to change now. And it's a great thing to look for and to pursue change. But we have to know that sometimes it doesn't happen immediately. Sometimes it doesn't happen instantly. It doesn't happen exactly when we want it to. I may want to take a high-powered shower at 3 in the afternoon in Chihuahua. That's not going to happen. I don't have the water for it. I don't have the water pressure for it. And this last year, Justice in Action, we put up 2 things we wanted to see. We had 2 ambitious goals that we did an amazing amount of research for, 2 goals that we did an amazing amount of work for, and we presented them to the leaders in our community. We planted that seed. And now we have a choice. We can stare at the ground where we planted it, pleading for it to grow. We can look at it where we planted it, see no crocus, even though we planted it 5 minutes ago, and think, it's probably dead, and we can abandon it. Or we can continue to work on it, supporting it, caring for it, knowing that with persistence and with care, this crocus will bloom. Sure, there may be a hot, dry spell where we think the environment is too hostile for a flower to gain any traction, and that it should be dead in its tracks. Heck, we may even see too many other flowers being planted or blooming right now, and we may not think it's worth the focus to look for the crocus. But this is the point of the desert, of the wilderness, of the struggles and the suffering that we go through in life. Life is hard. Life is struggle. In the words of the movie The Princess Bride, life is pain. Anyone that says otherwise is trying to sell you something. Because we are always constantly moving from one thing to another, one stage of life to another, one place to another. There's always change. But we keep working through it. It's normal for us to look to the future, especially when we're pushing for change or improvement. We can set our eyes on our goals, our outcomes, what could be, and it's not a bad thing. That's hope. But it can become a bit of a trap. I've been caught in that trap, getting stuck in a whirlwind of anticipation, looking forward to the next big thing and failing to account for my environment. In my junior year of high school, I had a surgery on my abdomen that left a 3-inch scar on my abdomen. It had an 8-week recovery period. At the end of those 8 weeks, the very next day, just happened to be my school's annual field and track day. All the excitement went to my head, and I signed up for the very first event of the day, the mile run. With all the enthusiasm and the desire for a comeback, I took off, fully confident in myself. I immediately started passing all the veteran athletes in the school, who were, of course, shouting after me, warning me, "No, Alex, slow down, pace yourself." But I was passing them. I was winning. What did they know? I kept pushing hard, but soon my lungs started burning, My legs started shaking, and I had to slow down, even down to a walk for a while. The sight of the finish line near the end did give me a little boost of inspiration, and I started to sprint, just narrowly avoiding being the very last person to cross the finish line. I had made it, but at what cost? I instantly collapsed after crossing the finish line. My legs stopped working, my arms didn't work. I started breathing heavy. I couldn't even get enough air. I was breathing as hard as I could. I couldn't even clear the mucus off my face. I was just breathing and breathing and breathing, trying to get a breath, and colors were just popping up in my vision, and I just could not do anything. I had pushed myself way too hard, beyond what my resources allowed for, with no regard to my environment. When we focus too much on the finish line, when we focus too heavily on the promised land, we can want that change, but when we want that change and focus on what will be too much, that's what causes the issue. Because that change doesn't happen when we want it to. We don't instantly get to cross the finish line just because we want to be there first. It's like trying to take a high-powered shower in the middle of the day. It's just not going to happen with the resources on hand. Like with justice in action, do we stare at the dirt hoping for instant growth? Or do we understand that true transformation takes time, care, persistence, and doing the same things again and again and again? This is why we're doing the house meetings again. Yeah, we did house meetings last year, but we got to keep doing these house meetings. We can't just do it once and then leave it alone forever. We have to care. We have to put the work in. Because the desert, the wilderness, life, it's always changing. And the key is we keep working through it. We recognize that life is full of transitions. Goals may shift, outcomes may change, but that's okay because it's part of the journey. So as we go through this wilderness together, let's recognize what is happening today, not just what we hope to see happen tomorrow. By relying on the persisting resources of cloud and fire that never leave from in front of us day to day, and by trusting that God has the ultimate goal in mind, we can stay grounded here and now with each other. We can rely on each other to help each other grow. We can listen to each other so that we can learn how to better pace ourselves in these transformations that we are pushing for. When we rely on each other, we can know that we won't lose ourselves in the endless pursuit of what might happen. Life is a dynamic and ever-changing process. We've looked into how the desert can teach us about adaptation, patience, and persistence. We've looked at how the desert can bloom with unexpected color, reminding us that transformation can happen even when it seems impossible. And sometimes, because our zealotry for the goal can blind us to what's actually happening, we can miss that beauty and growth can happen now, in the present moment. We can miss the small signs, the small blooming of the crocuses to tell us that something happened and change is coming. We may push ourselves too hard, eager to win, and end up burning ourselves out, unable to do anything for a while. But no matter what we do, the pillars of cloud and fire will continue to be there. They are always there. We always have the resources we need to thrive in an ever-changing environment. And we are called to always keep our eyes on these pillars. The pillars of cloud and fire stayed with Israel at all times. The pillars didn't outpace Israel. The pillars didn't leave Israel in the dust. Those resources for life stayed with them day by day, helping them and helping us to navigate the wilderness of life with purpose and faith. Let us move beyond fear, beyond overextending ourselves to catch a goal that we haven't gotten to yet, Let us support each other on the way, pacing ourselves, adapting to how life changes and to the new challenges that life brings us. True transformation takes time, care, and persistence. And by learning to rely on pillars of cloud and fire, we can learn to be here and we can learn to be now, fueled by the hope of the blooming crocus, knowing that it can happen where we least expect it. This is the word of God for us, the people of God. Thanks be to God.